Welcome to the Explainer for Reentrancy Prevention for Deposits, brought to you by Forge College. I am so glad you're here. We are continuing our Applied Solidity development track today. Specifically, we're diving into the comprehensive Ether handling and withdrawals module, looking at secure Ether deposits. Now, in our previous lesson, we mastered building automated deployment tasks, right? We set up the infrastructure to get our code out into the wild efficiently. But today, man, we are shifting gears in a major way. We're transitioning from deploying our automated infrastructure to securing the very vaults we've just built. Because let's face it doesn't matter how beautifully you can deploy a smart contract if the contract itself is essentially a leaky bucket. Let's set the stakes right away here. Imagine you walk up to a bank ATM, you put your card in, and you ask for $100. The machine obediently hands you the cash. But right before it actually updates your account balance, you distract it. Like maybe you wave a shiny object or tell it a really good joke. The ATM gets confused and literally forgets to deduct that $100 from your ledger. So you just ask for another 100 and another. What if a vault handed you money but forgot to check your balance? Well, that is exactly how hackers exploit distracted smart contracts to drain funds. And honestly, it sets the perfect stage for our engineering teardown today. So here's our blueprint for today. We're going to start with an introduction to secure deposits, move right into unmasking the reentrancy threat, and then simulate a vault exploit. After that, we'll cover 3 defenses against reentrancy, and finally, wrap things up with securing the final report. Let's dive in. All right, Section 1, Introduction to Secure Deposits, Beyond Simple State Assignments. Okay, so we really have to start viewing deposit functions not just as, simple math, but as active attack surfaces. Now, you might be thinking, handling incoming Ether is incredibly straightforward. A user sends funds, the contract receives them, and boom, you update a simple balance mapping. It feels totally safe, right? Because the Ether arrives simultaneously with the transaction. But, and this is a massive but, beware the hidden callbacks. Subtle code paths can actually introduce totally unexpected external code execution. We're talking things like events, user-provided token hooks, or external calls to receiver contracts that can inadvertently hand control right back over to a malicious user. Bottom line, if your deposit flow interacts with the outside world before finishing its own internal bookkeeping, you are leaving a backdoor wide open. Moving on to Section 2, Unmasking the Reentrancy Threat, the Infinite Loop. So what exactly is this enemy we're facing? Well, reentrancy is a vulnerability where an external call interrupts a function, allowing an attacker to recursively call back into that original function before its state actually updates. Think back to our distracted ATM analogy for a second. This is the digital equivalent of a thief reaching back into the open safe to grab another stack of cash before the bank teller even has a chance to write down that first withdrawal on their ledger. The attacker essentially pauses your contract, loops back into the vault, takes more money, and just repeats this infinite loop until your contract is completely 100% drained. Yikes, right? Which brings us to Section 3, Simulating the Vault Exploit, a Controlled Local Heist. Now, take a deep breath. I promise we are doing this safely by breaking a vulnerable vault locally, okay? Not on mainnet. So, this attack follows a very precise sequence. Step 1, the attacker deposits a tiny amount of Ether just to get their name on the ledger. Step 2, the attacker calls the vault's withdrawal function. Step 3, the vault eagerly sends the Ether back, but doing so triggers the attacker contract's fallback receive function. And step 4, well, this is the trapdoor. That receive function immediately re-enters withdrawal before the vault has updated the attacker's balance to 0. The vault looks at the ledger, says, oh, the balance is still there, and pays out a second time. It's brilliant, but devastating. To verify that our little heist was successful, we compare the expected result versus the exploit result. Our local Hardhat or Foundry test environment absolutely must show the attacker successfully draining more funds than they initially deposited. In your console, you want to see that the attacker balance is definitively greater than the deposit amount. If you capture that in your tests, well, congratulations, you've successfully proven the vulnerability actually exists. All right, let's fix it. Section 4, 3 defenses against reentrancy. Drafting the new schematics. Now, mastering these specific architectural patterns is a core part of the deep dive programming courses we offer at Forge College. And honestly, it's what separates a novice from an absolute expert. Let's break down this matrix of defenses. We have 3 primary ways to lock down the vault, and each one tackles a completely different part of the exploit surface. First up, the checks affects interactions pattern. The mechanism here is super simple. Update your internal balances before you make any external calls. The expected test result? 0 double withdrawals. Second, we have the mutex pattern. This basically allows only a single entry into the function. If an attacker tries to re-enter, the contract immediately reverts. And third, pull payments. Instead of pushing funds out, you have users pull funds from an isolated escrow, which completely removes push-related callbacks from your sensitive logic. Applying this to real code highlights the absolute golden rule of Solidity. Checks, affects, interactions. Just look at the vulnerable function on the left. It sends the ether and then sets the balance to 0. By the time it even tries to zero the balance, the attacker has already looped back. No good. Now on the right, our fixed vault applies the golden rule perfectly. It sets the balance to 0 first, as an effect, and then sends the ether as an interaction. Always, always, always update your internal accounting before handing out the cash. But sometimes you just want an extra layer of security. You want a literal deadbolt on the vault door. And that is exactly where the mutex pattern comes in, shown here as a non-reentrant modifier. It's incredibly elegant. Before the function runs, it requires that the vault is not locked. Then it locks the vault by setting locked to true. It runs the function, which is represented by that little underscore right there. And finally, it unlocks the vault when it's totally finished. If an attacker's receive function tries to recursively enter this, or any other protected code, they'll just hit a locked door and the entire transaction will revert. Bam! Safe and sound. Finally, Section 5, Securing the Final Report, Audit Readiness. Okay, so we've patched the code, but fixing the vulnerability is really only half the battle. Proving it to security auditors, that's the other half. A professional debug report needs to be totally airtight. Here are the essential components you're going to need. You need a concise executive summary of the vulnerability class. You need raw evidence, and I'm talking transaction hashes, stack traces, event logs, the whole shebang. You also need to clearly document the remediation applied using patched code snippets. And most importantly, you need a deterministic reproducibility proof. You must have reproducible test traces to form a credible security narrative. Because if you just say, hey, I fixed it, an auditor is not going to believe you. You have to prove that the exploit fails deterministically every single time. I want to leave you with this final question to think about. Are your deposit flows truly secure, or are they just waiting for the right callback? Treat every single deposit as a potential attack surface. Apply your state updates diligently, and always test your assumptions. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. If you found this teardown helpful, I highly encourage you to visit forge.college to explore more advanced Web3 security topics, engage with our community, and level up your applied learning. Until next time, keep your state clean and your vaults locked tight.